Earlier this year, Ontario celebrated its first year anniversary as an operating regulated iGaming space. iGaming Ontario, the iGaming regulator in the province, recently published its first set of figures from the first quarter of the 2023-24 fiscal year, reporting an all-time high of $14 billion in wagers. Yet, these celebrations did not come without initial hurdles.
The journey to a regulated market in Ontario was a long one. Was done in a very thoughtful way, a very deliberate way. Leading up to the launch, there was an incredible amount of anticipation about the potential and what this market could become. It was the birth of a new industry, or a newly regulated industry to some extent, in Canada. The market kind of presented itself to Canadian consumers in really two ways.
Although we've just celebrated a year, this actually has been an initiative that's been in the making since 2019. So that in itself is unique, in that there was this proactive approach, a really thoughtful approach. Looking at, I know that AGCO and IGO looked at how other jurisdictions around the world implemented their iGaming and sports betting programs. To ensure that they were taking advantage of the best practices, as well as tailoring it for the Ontario market as well.
In the fall of 21, the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation was allowed to offer single event sports wagering for the first time. And that's the first time that there was a regulated, consumer-friendly option available for the citizens of Ontario. And then it wasn't until April that the market opened for any regulated private operator. But the journey between September and April, I would say, was one of learning. If you think about the way the market was set up, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario became the overall regulator, and they created a subsidiary called iGaming Ontario, or IGO, which became the conduct and manage entity for the new regime. And so just in the same way that PointsBet was setting up shop, so was IGO.
I was with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission for a number of years as the Chief Strategy Officer there. Joined IGO, iGaming Ontario, in February of 2021. So I joined 14 months before we launched the market. I was employee number one for IGO. I took the job because this was such an exciting, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I'm still excited about it. Just the opportunity, what we've been able to achieve, really, really a great experience.
Previously, the quarterly record of $13.9 billion set in Q4 of fiscal year 2022-2023. But the $14 billion mark was officially breached during the period April 1st to June 30th.
It exceeded the projections. Initially, it was a rolled-in phase. So it started with a few operators, but operators could actually gradually come in. So it wasn't really until, the second and third quarter, and right up until the fourth quarter, that, we reached ultimately where we're at right now in terms of 42 operators and over 70 sites. So that was and I have to say, at RGC, we were a bit surprised by the number of operators and the number of sites, but I think probably the best surprise was the channelization rate. That the fact that it achieved in the first year 85%, which means that 85% of Ontarians who were online gambling were actually gambling on legal licensed sites, which even exceeded IGO's expectations in terms of the first year.
I was not disappointed in the first quarter reports. Really, when we launched, we thought if we had one operator, this would be a success. And so to have 12 on day one, we really saw that as a tremendous success. We've been curious because it's been a year first, so we're still working through what happens in the summer when the NHL and the NFL and the NBA aren't playing. Is there a dip in the market? And, we still don't know, because last year when we went through it, we didn't have the same number of operators that we do now.
Because the gray market operators were finding their pathway to becoming regulated operators, their numbers only got reported once they became a regulated operator. So Bet365 is the largest operator in the Canadian marketplace. It has been because it's been here for over a decade. All of its numbers were excluded from the early reporting. So I remember the reviews of the early reporting when they were comparing the Ontario market to the US markets, and there being some people that would write up a disappointment as it related to the Ontario numbers. I would say in the more recent quarters, most of that has turned around. The true run rate of this market, I think, is being understood. And if you take kind of the most recent results of the marketplace and you extrapolate them out, you have a market that maps to the potential that was described early on. The other thing that's really important to know about the Ontario market is it is both a casino and a sportsbook marketplace. The sports betting side, because it's so novel and so new, gets a lot of the attention, but the workhorse of the marketplace really is the casino and iGaming side of the market. And so I think the sportsbook side will continue to grow, but in the early, certainly in the first year, the majority of the revenues in this industry came from the iGaming casino side of the business.
Within the report, casino games, including slots and live and computer-based table games and peer-to-peer bingo, made up 83% of the record at $11.6 billion and contributed 72% of the $545 million gaming revenue recorded in the period, which was up $19 million on last year. But was casino always seen as a high performer in this new iGaming market?
In Ontario, I think we always knew casino was going to be important. The strength of the casino market was really a bit of a surprise. I think the other one is the velocity of competition. The fact that this is a market now where there are 45 independent operators and over 70 brands that are facing the customer has created a level of competition in this market that I guess was always, the framework always allowed for it, but it's in the course of 1 year has very much turned the Ontario market into maybe the most competitive jurisdiction in the world. And so for a company to be able to succeed in this marketplace, they have to be doing something right, they have to be able to cut through, and they have to be able to stand in a way that distinguishes themselves from the 74 other operators who are trying to build a relationship and establish a brand in the marketplace. The experience that we need to build and invest in around our casino product is an area that we're probably redirecting more investment there than we might have thought we were going to in the early days. And so I expect over the next 6, 12, 18 months that the most dramatic acceleration of our product experience is going to come on the casino side as we really move it from being average to being best in class. We already have a best in class sportsbook product where our investments will be more around maintaining the cutting edge and continuing to innovate in the ways in which consumers want to interact with the live betting experience and the in-play offerings.
Once again, I think that all of us were surprised, but pleasantly surprised, that OLG, Play OLG, the Crown, is still one of the top 3 sites. And that was really good news for us too, because we know how committed OLG is to player protection and to responsible gambling. We do a lot of work with them. We operate all the PlaySmart centers for OLG. And in their casinos and their iGaming and their bingo sites. Yeah. And so we were able to incorporate education and information into the PlaySmart centers about how to incorporate and utilize responsible gambling tools online into that education that we were providing to players. So that was very positive. The other thing that we learned is that the uptake, the utilization of RG tools is higher in Ontario than in other jurisdictions. And I think that really speaks to this history, this culture of responsible gambling that has existed in Ontario and in Canada for decades.
Moving forward, one of the key questions regarding Ontario iGaming's second year is just how sustainable is the current level of competition and innovation in the market, given the number of operators vying for market share and what will be crucial to ensure profitability.
Operators don't have to locate in Ontario, and I think that's part of the attraction that brought the operators here. But we released our economic development report today. We're talking about direct, indirect, induced employment of around 12,000 jobs, good jobs here. I'd like to be able to continue to foster that it's not just the revenue share that we're taking from operators, but we actually have the support systems in place, whether it's through the education of talent that operators say, I want to come to Ontario because they've got the best software programmers, or there are just other reasons that the operators want to locate here.
What I see happening now, and largely under the leadership of the Canadian Gaming Association, is the industry starting to come together on topics that are really important for the sustainability of the industry. So if you looked at the CGA's focus right now, one of the big pillars that they're leaning into is responsible gaming, and how do we as an industry start to establish a narrative that puts our best foot forward in terms of producing a sustainable, reliable industry around things like player health and responsible gaming.
We hear from the operators that Ontario is one of the largest and most robust gambling markets in the world. What's really important to us, James, is that we've got operators in Ontario and in Canada who really value responsible gambling and consumer protection. And we know based on, one of the things that iGo did built into the licensing agreement, which is also unique to Ontario and to Canada, is that all the operators, the new iGaming operators, must go through RG check accreditation in the first 2 years of their license. And in the first year, we were actually able to provide that accreditation to 17 operators. And maybe that's one of the surprises too. We thought we might get a little bit of pushback from the operators. I mean, it's a big undertaking, start to launch in a new market, but then to have to go through an RG check accreditation. We thought there might be no pushback at all. In fact, they embraced it. Perfect. They've absolutely embraced it. And some of the operators, they only had to get their RG check accreditation for Ontario, but they thought this was such a positive thing for them to do that they actually extended it to some of their other jurisdictions as well. And we've also heard from the operators that what they've learned and what they're having to do in Ontario with respect to responsible gambling is they're now incorporating that into the other jurisdictions that they're operating as well. So it seems as though, Ontario is going to play quite an influential role in advancing responsible gambling outside of Canada as well.